Eric Whitacre, thanks so much for talking to the Sound Health Network.
So good to see you again. Thank you.
So, for our audience that might not be aware that you were a pioneer in virtual choirs well before the pandemic, can you give us just a hint as to how it all started for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because you say the word pioneer, and of course, while it was happening, I never once thought that it was anything special. It started for me just with a single video. This young woman named Britlin Losi. She was 17 years old. I didn't know her. She was Long Island, and she uploaded a YouTube video singing the soprano part to a piece that I'd written. This is back in 2009, and a friend sent me the link, and I saw it and thought, God, what if we could get 25 people doing what Britlin is doing? And so I made my first very humble virtual choir way back then, stitching together all of these individual videos of people uploading their parts, their different parts, and singing it. And like I said, at the time, I never once thought that anybody outside like my little circle of choir geek friends, that might include you, would be interested, right? Just singers who love singing for no other reason. And then the video went viral, and then I was just inundated with emails and posts from singers from around the world saying, I have to be a part of this. When's the next one? And so that's what really started the whole thing. And we've been doing it for, my God, 12 years now, I guess.
Why do you think people wanted to be a part? Do you think it was a generational thing? Was it a zeitgeist? Like, what do you think drew in those first people before once it took off, yeah, of course, everybody wants to be part of something that's hot, but like in the beginning, what do you think it was?
I think there is a certain kind of spirit, and I think it's more prevalent than I think people on the outside would believe, which is that there are people who just love to sing. And that's a lot of people. You and I both know this, right? That they're just people who have the sing. I have the soul of a singer. I don't have a great voice. I think that's why I compose, is because I can't sing that well, but I want to sing. I have this ache to do it. And a lot of those first people, and frankly, through all the virtual choir projects, weren't singers. They're not great singers, but they want to sing. And I think there's something deeply spiritual and human about that they want to join. They want to lend their voices to be part of something larger than themselves. Mm-hmm. And all it takes is just the call to do that. And people see that and say, yes, I want to sing. It's an amazing thing to see people, gravity. It's more than gravity. It's really magnetic. Be pulled into that thing almost without truly understanding how much they want to be a part of it.
And when you're, as a composer, when you're trying to figure out how to make this technically possible, what were some of the things that you were thinking about? And in next iterations, like what did you improve? How did you optimize it?
With the first one, I didn't think at all. In fact, I didn't think so much that when I first put up the videos, or when I put out the call to sing, I said, okay, everybody upload your videos. And then somebody said, how do we know what tempo to sing at? And it had never occurred to me, we should probably work that out, right? So I had to make a little conductor video that people could sing to. And then the technical aspect of it, my God, it was behind the scenes. It was this young man named Scott Haynes, the first one. And there were 185 singers. And that already is a massive challenge, just to mix all those singers and EQ them and get the sound, the external sounds out. With the second one, already we were at over 2,000 singers. And so it became a real challenge, just how do you mix it, right? How do you mix the sound? And we sort of developed a batch processing technique of taking care of all of that. And then the equally difficult part is that how do you render 2,000 moving videos into a single cinematic gesture? And that also took some real tinkering. And I'd say, especially for virtual choirs 3 and 4, we were pushing right up against the edge of what we could do in terms of rendering, where we would have to, okay, here's the 10-second clip that we wireframe, and then hit render, and then come back 36 hours later and oh, yep, that didn't work at all, right? like it really was pushing the machines that we had. And then finally, in this last one with Virtual Choir 6, which had over 17,000 singers, we started to run out of actual pixels on a 4K screen. We were watching the numbers go up as people were submitting their videos and thinking, oh my God. I think the final tableau, which has every single picture in it, has 23 pixels dedicated to each person. And the solution we came up with was the producers. This was during pandemic. They hired out a big theater in London and then projected it frame by frame so they could just look for errors with a little notepad. Say, yep, okay, they're in frame 416. We've got something going on the left hand side. So each time it's been just kind of pushing it as far as we can, trying to figure out how to make it not just big, but inclusive, because most important for us is that every single person who submits a video is in. There's no audition process.
I mean, that's amazing. And then I wonder though, like, what happens if you do get someone who's like not singing in key, or like in rhythm? This is the, like, what do you?
Well, it's funny because over the pandemic, I don't know how many thousands of different groups made their own virtual choir, and opera companies or musical theater companies, they made their own full versions of operas and musicals virtually using this kind of stick and glue technique that we had come up with. And people would write to me and say, how did you get them to sound so great? And I had the one secret weapon that nobody else had, which was that the more people are involved, the better it sounds, because it's a little bit like a football stadium. If you have 80,000 people singing a tune, half of them aren't even sober. And so if you were to listen to individual voices, it wouldn't sound specifically great, but voices, unlike any other instrument, as they mass, it sort of polishes off the rough edges and gets this incredibly beautiful, almost angelic sound to it. It's very haunting when you hear massed voices singing like that. But if you've got a small group, if you've got 25 people and you're trying to blend them all, and as a musician, everybody's got a different vibrato and even a different vowel. That's a job nobody wants to have, trying to mix all of that. So we have the advantage of being big.
And when you compose for these very large scale choirs, how do you ensure that the line that you're composing is going to fit the medium?
It's a really good question. So I think in terms of composing, well, actually, the only two that I composed specifically for the virtual choir was 5 and 6. The first 4 were pieces that I'd already written and had thought of as a regular choir. And they came with all sorts of issues. Like, for instance, the hardest one of all of them is diction, right? So if somebody if the word is today, it starts with that T, which is not a problem at all if you've got a group of people in a room and today they all can sing it together. But if you've got 10,000 people on the fly all trying to line up a T, what you get on the back end is right. It's a mess. And so by Virtual Choir 5, I figured this out. And the piece that I wrote is called Deep Field, and it's a tribute to the Hubble telescope. And the choir sings only oohs and ahs. So there's no specific entrance. It's all liquidy and gooey. And I remember thinking, okay, we've cracked the code here. But then with Virtual Choir 6, I wanted to say something very specific about the times that we were in. And what I was worried about was this kind of breaking apart of society, that the isolation would have this effect of really pulling people apart. You can see that in the Virtual Choir 6 video, people in their little isolated windows and then finally coming back together. And the words that came into my mind, I also wrote the words for that one, was simply sing gently, that as a metaphor for here's a way to move forward, live with compassion, be gentle, be empathetic with each other. But I remember writing it down, those words, and saying, sing gently. And as a singer, there's no worse consonant you could have than sing at the beginning, especially when you have 17,000 people singing it. And so I had the conversation with the engineers, and they said, we'll figure it out. You just put it down. We'll figure it out on the back end. So we had to kind of digitally shape all of those S's. Otherwise, it would sound like a parcel tongue convention.
I mean, yeah, in some ways, that's the benefit of the virtual choir, that you can sort of edit, as opposed to, say, if you were in a big stadium. I'm Lithuanian, and one of the things we love to do every 4 years is have a massive choral concert where there's 10,000 people in the stadium singing together. So do you think that would you approach that kind of in-person massive choral experience differently than you would the virtual choir?
No, and well, you know super well, right? By the way, I adore Lithuania, and I've been one of those big sings also in Estonia, and it's there's nothing like it in the world. If any of your listeners have the chance to go experience that one day, be a part of it. There's nothing like it. But
Next summer is the next one, I think.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I know where we'll be. So you know that even if there's 20,000 people, so the conductor has to give a relatively big gesture, but actually you could do boom. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it feels to me like a mechanism that is already inherent in people, that it's, I don't know if we've evolved to do this, where as long as they can see and hear you, you can take a breath that can be so expressive, can be filled with a very specific emotional color, can be all the tempo information is in there. And it doesn't matter how big the group is, they find it. It's almost like a murmuration, right? With starlings, where a single person breathes and it happens quickly in real time. And so I've conducted groups as big as 9,000, where I was just, my hands were never, never bigger than that. And everyone follows. But when it's virtual, and not only can you not sing with anybody else, but you're not singing with anybody else, it's just you alone in a room, things get very strange.
Hmm.
You take a breath when you don't want to take a breath. You become hyper aware of your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so the stitching together of it afterwards is, it feels much more artificial than this thing that just unfolds in front of you, no matter how big the real choir you have in front of you is.
That's really fascinating to think about, because yeah, if you think about what the actual task is when you're by yourself, it is a completely different experience from when you're in this sea of people. And yet, yeah, like the ultimate reward, when you see the full virtual choir, you get the same upwelling of connection and joy.
That's the part that I never would have imagined. That when I made the first one, just to see, will this work? What I was not prepared for is that the music remains intact, right? That somehow everybody making their version of a crescendo and decrescendo, it's more than just getting louder and softer, that it actually has the same humanity in it. And in the aggregate, it comes through. We're actually making music, with a capital M, not just singing at the same time. One of the things I think accounts for that is, I have this very special position in the virtual choirs that we make, in that I'm the only person, and the team behind me, we're the only people who get to see the videos in their raw state. What happens is people go onto the website, they log in, and then they sit down and they've got their music, and you see them, everyone's adjusting, and people putting on makeup, getting their hair right. They do this, look at the lighting. Then they start their little video, they record in 2, 3. And then they start to sing. Well, I'm seeing all of that, right? They've uploaded all of that to me. And of course I would never make any of that public, but I get to see people getting ready. And what is amazing is this phenomenon I see over and over and over, is that people come in and they're wearing their mask for the day. I mean, sometimes literally a mask, right? They're painting on their mask, and they're here, and they've even got this kind of thing. Okay, we're ready to go, and starts to record. And the moment they take that first breath, you see all of that just fall away. It disappears, and you see the true person. Something about singing just unlocks or releases the person who's underneath that daily mask. And I think then somehow, again, in the aggregate, the virtual choirs have that bubbling right there on the surface, this vulnerability. And I think it accounts for part of the reasons they seem so magical when we watch them. At least it is for me.
Yeah, no, I resonate very much with what you're saying, and I can imagine, sort of just as you painted this picture for me, how that would unfold, and the kind of trust that the person is putting in your hands to take what they're presenting. It's really fascinating, and in some ways, it's like, you can think of it maybe as harder for a lot of people than being in a mass of people where they know they're not alone, and here they're being vulnerable by themselves, which in some ways is much more frightening.
I think much, much more frightening. I mean, as a singer, there is no more naked feeling you have than just singing alone. It's there's nowhere to hide. And especially for people who are like me, who join choirs so that they never have to sing solo, right? That they get the thrill of singing, but never have to be heard alone. A big part of what I feel my job is when the virtual choirs are being made is just acting as a coach on the sidelines and saying, you can do this. You're so brave. I believe in you, just so that people can overcome that sense of being naked on camera. And you said it very well, which is trust. Like you have to really put some faith in the process that, all right, on the other side of this, this is all going to work. Because in the moment, I think it's not so fun for a lot of people, but ideally they're compelled to do it to be part of something larger than themselves.
I mean, and you can see that in their faces and in the reactions, of course, afterwards, how popular these virtual choirs become in the videos that you upload. When you were on stage at the Kennedy Center this past October, you were conducting the Children's Chorus of Washington and the virtual choir at the same time, and Sing Gently. And before you started, you had mentioned that you thought that Virtual Choir 5 was going to be the last one. And then, so tell us why was it going to be the last one, and what changed your mind?
Yeah, it was, well, I was talking about this before. It's this piece, Deep Field. And with each virtual choir kept getting bigger and bigger, even from that second one. And what we were doing behind the scenes is actually trying to slow down the growth, because we were afraid that we were going to get to an unmanageable number. And by the time we got to Virtual Choir 5, we had kind of figured out, okay, let's embrace all of this. Let's get as many singers as we can. And so actually, there were 2 tracks. One track you could take where you could download the sheet music and read it and sing it. And then there was a whole other track for people who knew nothing about reading sheet music or had never been in choir before. And you only listened to what you had to sing. You didn't even have to sing it in tempo in some places. And then, so with the idea of let's include as many people. And it was all to celebrate this image, the Deep Field image that was taken by the Hubble telescope in 1995. For me, that's the most important image in human history. I don't know if your listeners remember it, but it's basically the Hubble telescope pointed it at itself at a completely blank area of the sky, which means to earthbound telescopes, there was nothing there. And over 11 days, 385 exposures, I think, long exposures, collected every photon of light they could. And when it was revealed, you see thousands of galaxies in this sliver of sky, not stars, but galaxies. And we now know that you can turn a telescope in any direction and our universe looks that way. It brings me to my knees when I see that image. So we premiered that piece at the Kennedy Space Center with some astronauts in attendance. And the space nerd in me was just, I was passed out several times. It's just as good as it gets. And it's on the giant IMAX screen. And it's like, okay, that's it. There's a full orchestra. It's 23 minutes long. I mean, we pushed it as far as we could. So, all right, that's it for virtual choirs. And then of course the pandemic started. And suddenly no one was singing, literally no one on earth. And until that moment, I don't think I could have imagined it. It's like, even in a film, it would seem unbelievable. And even worse, that singers were being branded as super spreaders. You remember there were those?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yep.
Those were where people were getting sick and even dying. And so just the idea that our art form could somehow be dangerous. I don't know about you. I was in the fetal position for 2 or 3 weeks. It's just, what is happening?
Yep.
From that grew this thing that, okay, we have to make a virtual choir. That if there was ever a time, and maybe that's why we've been doing this for 10 years, is so that now we can actually make one. And it's funny because I was just talking to the producer today, Claire Long, the producer of all these virtual choirs. And she was saying that the project, even more than the music itself, the project served as a balm, as a salve for so many people, people who really just needed to be connected, to be part of something and to feel what it was to sing, even if it had to be in isolation. And how beautiful it was that time, Behind the
Mhm.
scenes, of course, it was 3 months of all of us not sleeping and trying to figure out how to make one of these things when none of us could be together. Right. That was the other challenge, is the whole team was all separate. So we were doing everything in pieces. But it was quite a beautiful experience while it was happening.
What did you notice in other people's reactions to the pandemic, who were making, experimenting in their own ways with the Zoom box bands? What was going through your head? Was it like, wait, I can make that better? Or like, or was it more just like,
No, for me, it was like this. I was just marveling every day how wildly creative people were. That it was funny because the early days, you could see everybody like, oh, really? Is this how we have to make these things? Like one brick at a time? No. And you could see everybody just communicating and trying. But then within months, people had gotten unbelievably clever with how to put these things together. And I saw some virtual concerts that just blew me away. I didn't know it was possible. And so in the back of my mind, of course, I'm taking notes the whole time and watching, oh, you could do this. And well, what if you did this? What if you applied it this way? And so now I think we've come out of pandemic times with some pretty good ideas about not how to make one of these, what I call stick and glue virtual choirs, but actually how to start pushing the envelope towards something that is genuinely hybrid, where people are making music in real time, using isolated techniques like this. And I think we're getting close. Technology is certainly getting close.
Mhm. What do you think we've learned from the pandemic in terms of music's role in connecting us and, helping us deal with trauma and loss? Do you feel like it was just something that, you already knew that just became amplified, or was there something new that came out of it that really changed your approach to either composition or music making?
Well, I've been lucky that in my entire life, I've never had to really experience genuine social trauma. I've never gone through a war on my own land. I've never seen mass hardship the way so many people have. So this is the first time in my own small way I got to experience what it is to be cut off from the things that make a society work. And I don't think I understood until the pandemic how essential music is in the human experience. That it became for me, yeah, there were I don't know how many days I had where if it were not for music, I don't know, I think the despair would have overcome me. And I'm not talking about my own music or virtual choirs. I'm talking about Stevie Wonder and Bach and Rodgers and Hammerstein. Like if it were not for music, just the phenomenon of music, I don't think. Ooh, those were some really lonely days. And I think now, talking to musicians who are coming back, they all say the same thing that I'm about to say, which is that there is this sense of gratitude about getting to make music at whatever level, at the most amateur level where you've just joined a choir, or at the most professional level, but getting to make music together in the same room. There's this gratitude. And I know for myself, I will never take a second of it for granted again. I'm always fully present when I'm making music. I'm sure you are too. It's my life's work. I adore doing it, but I don't think I ever realized that it was special and rare and precious and could evaporate overnight. And so now every concert I've given, including that Kennedy Center concert, I'm basically in tears. Do you know what I mean? Are you the same way? I'm like fighting back tears while it's happening.
Oh yeah, I find it sometimes overwhelming. It's hard for me to practice now just for the sake of like, it feels like everything has to be, so meaningful and big. And, sometimes it's hard just to vocalize for the sake of vocalizing. It's just, and a number of my musician friends, some of whom, were really at the cusp, were in the middle of building these really successful careers, with a string quartet, for example, that we've all heard of, or et cetera. And they found themselves playing music, virtually for people who were in hospital dying from COVID through FaceTime. And now their mission has changed. Like, they're no longer chasing always the kind of Carnegie Hall accolades, but instead thinking, what if I could just go back into this one patient's room who's, going through a life transition and just play for them. I wonder if that's something that will continue on, or
I hope so. I truly hope so. I think it will. I actually think it will. And in no small part, and you're one of the only people I could talk to you about this, is because of the science behind all of it, right? That it seems to me that during pandemic, well, maybe less during pandemic, right before pandemic, and now as we come out of it, because hospitals were sort of in triage mode the entire time. But this idea that music can play a major part in health and well-being, not just using those as buzzwords, but actually help, right? And that there's data, which means that then there's scientific proof, which means then that there's funding, which then means that hospitals are going to be saving money, which then means, hey, it reminds me of solar power, right? It's like, there's a way to make money with solar power. Great, let's do it. So, but now that we've had these experiences where we can say definitively, this is good for people, then I think what that does for the musicians themselves is remind all of us that, oh, that's right. That's right. This is what we're doing. We're actually just communicating with a single person and just connecting. And not to make it too big, but I actually think healing both parties, by the way. I think that musicians are also healing themselves over and over and over every time they play. I know I am myself. And that I think, especially for professional musicians, you can really get on that track, like you say, the Carnegie Hall track. And at the end of the day, it's a much more spiritual endeavor that musicians, it's a true vocation, choosing music as a life.
So now, as things are opening up, as we're sort of, our society is changed in fundamental ways, but also there's a kind of return to some of the things that were familiar to us from before the pandemic. How do you see your career unfolding forward? What are you most excited to work on now? What are your objectives?
Well, it's interesting. So, right before we started this interview, we were talking about, you and your directing career, working on. So I've written this little chamber opera, this little Christmas opera. It's The Gift of the Magi. And I wrote the libretto too. This was a big project over the past 3 years. And we're going to perform the newest version of it a month from now in New York, ironically in Carnegie Hall. But what I have discovered is I love writing characters. I love thinking about bringing characters to life. And when someone is able to do that, either in film or in television or in theater or in opera or musical theater, when they're able to take the combination of words and just and acting and plot, and then bring these human truths to life, I just find it magical. I am amazed. So I think that's what I want to be doing. I don't know what that means. I don't know if maybe I'll work on another opera, or if I'll maybe go back and look at writing another musical. But that's what excites me is thinking. I have to say all of that is, I basically blame Lin-Manuel Miranda, because I was on the Hamilton train early and I haven't gotten off. I think it's a heartbreaking work of staggering genius. And the level of character building, world building, and just his dazzling use of the English language. It's super inspiring to me, and so that's what I get excited about now.
Well, I can't wait to go see, sing in, or direct another Eric Whitacre opera.
Three. You'd be the first person to ever do all three. Have you directed something you've also sung in? Have you done that?
I've produced. I haven't directed. I've directed operas that I've sung the roles in, but never at the same time. Yeah, I think it's too much of a conflict of interest.
Yeah, it'd always be like, no, I need to be standing here where the
That's right.
but it's an interesting challenge now that I think about it, because I'm not sure I can think of a single instance of this happening. Can you, in opera or musical theater, has there been the star who's also the director? And the reason
Uh,
it happens in film all the time.
yeah. I was thinking film. I don't know that it would. I don't think it. I think it would be really hard in musical theater. There's just so many technical pieces that you need to be on this end to see.
But at the same time, maybe, it could be it, it could be a new way forward. I mean, you might be able to tell a story in a way that is so personal, like your vision is so complete.
Mm.
And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. I mean that actually, because, sorry to start nerding out on this, but you must feel this all the time as a performer, that there's a dance with directors, and sometimes it's great, and then sometimes it's like, no, actually my character needs to be doing this, and the rest of the characters need to be doing this in order for this, like, you can see it so clearly.
Well, to be honest, that's one of the reasons I began to make the switch, because I felt like as a performer, I just couldn't turn off the director. And when I was working on the director in my head, I was disagreeing, and then that wasn't going to lead to a good show. So that's, yeah. But I mean, I think there's,
I want to propose it here first. I think this, I'm sure you've thought about this at least somewhere back there, but I think you should do this. I think you should star in and direct an opera. I think it would be really interesting to see what would happen.
well, I'll put it on my to-do list for objectives.
In all your free time. What?
But yeah, thank you. Um, so we're talking this month about music and its role in terms of healing communities. And so I wondered if you just wanted to give us the last word on how you feel that choirs, and maybe virtual choirs, as a part of, I mean, it's not entirely your work. Obviously your choral work is in-person choral work is just as strong, but what do you think? What do you hope that the larger public could understand about the power of choral music to heal a community?
Specifically choral music. Well, to go back to simple data, right? There's study after study now that shows from all different angles how good singing together actually is for people. And it's everything from these massive health benefits that it reduces the levels of stress hormones in your body and increases all of the good hormones, and it creates a sense of bonding, and you feel part of something larger than yourself. I keep saying those words, but it's really true. Even if you've done it before, the moment you sing with a group of people, you're connected. And we all know now that that's a massive part of a healthy lifestyle, is feeling just part of something, feeling involved and feeling valuable. So we know that there are these amazing health benefits to the body at all ages. The study after study have shown this, but then there are all of these social components too, right? That singing together, we know, especially for children, make them better students, regardless the discipline. They become better students in math, in science, in history, in literature, in geography, in biology, and music, just by making music together. It also increases, levels of empathy and compassion, and it just makes people better citizens. And I was just saying to somebody the other day, they were talking about music and religion, and I'm not a religious person, but my music often gets associated with a religious experience. I think mostly because it's choral music. And I was saying, I actually think that music is much, much bigger than religion. It's maybe the most fundamental way we have of becoming a group, of bonding together as a group on so many different levels. And it happens almost instantly. The moment you take a breath together and sing, you're this group. And that in that light, then, I think that say in the West here, that religion has very smartly co-opted music, not in a cynical, evil way, but as they've used it as a tool for bonding people. And one of the virtues of religion that has gotten lost as all of it has waned is that people used to sing together all the time. Sometimes every day, you'd simply come together in a single place and sing. And I know from personal experience and anecdotal experience and scientific experience that that just makes a better community, makes a stronger, more compassionate community. That's the whole game. The funny part is it's all there already. Like it's not this wild magical fix that it's, everybody just get everybody in a room and start singing, and it's amazing what happens. It's maybe the oldest toolbox we've got. So I'm a big advocate for it. And I will say too, if any of your listeners out there are considering joining a choir and have never done so, maybe they're just, that I would just encourage them to be brave, take that one single step, and they'll be like me. The moment you taste that experience, I mean, you'll be chasing that dragon the rest of your life. You won't be able to imagine a life without coming together and singing with people.
Well, Eric Whitacre, thanks so much for talking to us at the Sound Health Network.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, great. So